So welcome everyone to the last session of our IWAC conference. This session V3, Fostering Ethnographic Interactions and Collaborations, Implications for WAC and WID. A couple of quick reminders, please keep your mics muted during the presentation to eliminate any background noise. And I will also be recording this session to upload to Whova with closed captioning later today or early next week. So without further ado, I'd like to hand this off to Camilla for a few opening remarks.
So thank you for being here. I'm Camilla Kenyon from the writing program at the University of Denver, and I'm joined by Alejandro Cerón from anthropology at DU and Dinko Hanandinko also from DU from geography. So we'll have the talks and then invite questions. So either put those in the chat or ask them directly afterwards. So we will start with Alejandro's talk about the DU Ethnography Lab. Are you starting the talk, Annie? Yeah, okay.
Hello, my name is Alejandro Cerón, and I am an associate professor in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Denver. Let me share my screen with you. The title of my presentation is An Interdisciplinary Ethnography Lab, Catalyst for Student, Faculty, and Community Collaboration. And I will share with you a little bit about the creation of the DU Ethnography Lab and our experience so far. Throughout the presentation, you will see the acronym DUL, which stands for DU Ethnography Lab. The presentation follows a chronologic outline, starting with the prehistory of DUL from 2014 to 2016, the creation of DUL in 2017 and 2018, and what we have been up to and the opportunities and challenges we see for our immediate future. My experience that would eventually lead to the creation of DUL began when I started incorporating short ethnographic projects in several of the classes I taught, like applied anthropology, cultural anthropology, and medical anthropology. My goal was to bring together experiential learning and community engaged courses. Those projects usually involved a community partner, and in those years, I also realized that there was interest in ethnography from undergraduate and graduate students majoring in geography, religious studies, social work, education, music, international studies, English, history, and more. Through this modality, my students and I produced reports on barriers and facilitators for mental health among Latinos for a community clinic, the needs of Latinx people for a grassroots organization, perceptions about mental health among young men of color for an interagency coalition, an assessment of the challenges faced by students, staff, and faculty with young children, an assessment of the perceptions about work-life balance among DU students, staff, and faculty, and an analysis of a global initiative promoting kidney transplants for a consultant at the Guatemalan office of the Pan American Health Organization. Despite our satisfaction and good intentions, some students, community partners, and I felt that we would have liked to continue to work after the end of the course, but it was hard to sustain such work. Beyond my personal experience, students and colleagues at DU and beyond planted the seeds that generated DUL. Dialogue with students taking my research methods in anthropology and ethnographic methods classes between 2014 and 2016 gave me the initial inspiration. The interest and ideas I received from grad students were particularly illuminating, informing me about the applications of ethnography in their different fields of study. Similarly, enlightening were my conversations with Professor Camilla Kenyon of the Youth Writing Program, organizer of this panel. In 2015, she invited me to participate in conversations in the disciplines an annual event organized by the writing program where I learned about the opportunities that doing ethnography offers to students who are learning how to write. A third source of inspiration came from two stimulating readings. The special issue Involve Me and I Learn, Teaching and Applying Anthropology, published in 2016 in the journal Annals of Anthropological Practice, presents different authors' experiences intertwining teaching, learning, and doing anthropological work with students. Similarly, the 7th volume of the Ethnographers Toolkit, titled Ethnography in Action by Jean Schensul and Margaret Lecomte, offers detailed descriptions of successful projects that involve connecting research, teaching, and community campus partnerships. I knew by the end of 2017 that students across campus needed support in their ethnographic endeavors, and I knew that there were practical ways available for addressing these needs that colleagues in other universities had used. However, my switch from inspiration to action began in 2018, thanks to my many informal conversations with then anthropology grad students Ellie Brereton and Emily Creek. The idea of creating an ethnography lab began with them, and we talked a lot about potential ways to make it happen. The next year, then anthropology grad students Emily Baker and Julian Nilsson volunteered their time in the winter and spring of 2019 to offer intellectual and logistic support to the initial steps that led to the creation of Dual. While getting inspiration from experiences in other universities was crucial, it was also important to ground the idea in realities at DU. For instance, at DU, we emphasize the teacher-scholar model, which implies that we do not see teaching as an obstacle for doing research, but that we aim at intertwining our research and teaching facets. This also meant that our goal with Dual should not be to build a research lab that depended on external grants for functioning, but one that was compatible with the teacher-scholar model. DU's College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences had also made explicit in its strategic plan its aspiration for deepening and expanding experiential learning opportunities. Similarly, the Department of Anthropology's vision promotes publicly engaged anthropology through its MA and BA programs. But additionally, I had by then learned that there were at least 14 faculty members at DU who used ethnography for their teaching or research activities, distributed in 9 academic units like geography and the environment, media, film and journalism studies, sociology and criminology, music, education, language, the writing program, international studies, and anthropology. And of course, each of them had students potentially interested in learning and doing ethnographic work. Dual was conceived through conversations among 14 DU faculty members from those academic units. We started by discussing Dual's nature and goals during the fall of 2018 and implementing some networking activities during the winter and spring quarters of 2019, such as establishing a listserv, beginning to create a website, and organizing the first 2 brown bag lunches, focusing on research ethics and sharing work in progress. Dual aspires to be a catalyst for the multidisciplinary scholarship and learning of ethnography through the promotion of collaborations among faculty, students, and the broader community. Gravitating around the craft of ethnography, a methodology with a venerable scholarly tradition and multiple contemporary applications, Dual hopes to take advantage of currently existing expertise at DU and to offer thematic flexibility to support students' goals and community partners' needs. At Dual, we work towards 4 goals: facilitate interactions and collaborations among faculty who use ethnography in research or teaching, offer a space where students interested in ethnography can develop their ideas and skills, offer faculty and students an institutional home that helps nurture sustainable community collaborations, and offer faculty and students the resources needed for carrying on ethnographic projects. With those 4 goals, by the summer of 2019, the seeds had germinated and Dual was ready to begin sprouting. In addition to sharing information and resources and reaching out asking for support for projects or student advising, we have started to work on a few projects I will briefly present to you in the next slide. I hope that it is evident from my presentation that the 4 goals co-construct each other, that the projects are interconnected, and that we are generating multiple modes of experiential learning opportunities for students. Campus culture and sustainability outcomes at DU is a research project we are embarking on to support the initiative of Dinko Hanan, who is also in this panel, a grad student in the Department of Geography and the Environment. This research aims to understand how campus beliefs and embedded campus culture shape sustainability choices. The project was developed in coordination with DU's Center for Sustainability and is involving undergraduate students and research assistants. Teaching ethnography in first-year composition courses is something Dr. Camila Kenyon, also presenting in this panel, has done for many years. She will talk more about this in her presentation. Project Protect Food Systems Workers is a grassroots coalition that was organized in early 2020 to ensure that food system workers in Colorado are adequately protected from COVID and appropriately compensated for their labor and for the risks they assume through their work. Project Protect attends to the new and urgent needs of Colorado's food system workers in the COVID context, but it also aims to address long-standing forms of marginalization that undermine food security and should not be tolerated in a society that aspires to equality and justice for all. In May 2020, Project Protect's data team reached out to Dual asking for support collecting, processing, and disseminating farm workers' stories. With the vision and expertise of Professor Esteban Gomez, one of the Dual's founders, who specializes in digital and visual anthropology, Dual is now designing a project for organizing farm workers' personal narratives and designing a virtual exhibit that will be part of Project Protect's website. This project has involved undergraduate students and graduate students in Dr. Gomez's class and also a few research assistants. Moving forward, in the summer of 2020, Dual began collaborating with a team of 4 epidemiologists working at the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment, CDPHE. Starting with the premise that public health data tends to misrepresent minoritized social groups and sometimes invisibilizes social groups, we are critically analyzing public health approaches to social inequities, and we are bringing museum anthropology knowledge and practices into the mix. Professor Kelly Fayard involved her students to find ways for tackling the problem of misrepresentation of social groups by public health data. They came up with recommendations that our CDPHE colleagues are now starting to implement in their website, and we remain engaged in a collaboration that will generate more opportunities for students through courses, capstone projects, or research assistantships. Finally, documenting essential voices for social justice is a project we have started in 2021 by initiative from Carlos Jimenez, professor in media, film, and journalism, and one of Dual's founders, who specializes in documentary and oral history production. This project will offer opportunities to students taking Professor Jimenez's classes to access internship opportunities with History Colorado, where they will get training on documenting oral histories, and they will then document oral histories from minoritized groups in Colorado. Although I feel very proud of what Dual has accomplished so far, it is clear to me that it is still in its infancy. Oral histories from minoritized groups model, I believe that Dual would be able to function without depending on external funding or grants. Second, Dual has a lot of potential for creating opportunities for experiential learning, both through class assignments and co-curricular projects. Students whose motivation and creativity are touched by these opportunities will benefit the most. Third, although the basic functioning of Dual does not depend on external funding, the projects and collaborations catalyzed by Dual offer the possibility for applying to an expanded repertoire of external funding opportunities. Moving on to the immediate challenges, first, up until now, less than half of the 14 founding faculty have been directly involved in projects. It will be important to pay attention to the relevance that Dual may have to each of them, which will depend on their needs and possibilities to get involved. Second, there needs to be a clear and transparent governance process that does not overburden Dual's members, that allows for dynamic flexibility, but that formalizes some rules that avoid arbitrary decisions and potential for conflict. Third, since part of Dual's vision and goals involves the development of partnerships with community organizations, we need to adopt clear guidance for engaging with the community. We may need to consider working with a community advisory board or other modality of community campus partnership. Thank you for watching. Please stay for the rest of the panel presentations and discussion. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me personally or to the VU Ethnography Lab via email or the website.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. My name is Dinko Hanan Dinko. I'm a PhD candidate at the Department of Geography and the Environment at the University of Denver. And today my presentation is on exploring the emancipatory potential of ethnographic writing for addressing climate change challenges. This presentation is based on my dissertation study aimed at understanding the dynamics and lived experience of climate-induced water insecurity at the local level in Ghana. I adopt an emancipatory approach embedded in political ecology theoretical framework to examine and investigate the nature and dimensions of climate-induced water insecurity in semi-arid Ghana. The ultimate goal of this research is to write a report that gives both the researcher and the research an active voice by giving them more authority to challenge the status quo and thus addressing the concerns of power and control over water resources. Here is an outline of my presentation. And in the past 2 decades, dramatic climatic changes, as evidenced by prolonged drought and sudden floods, as well as demographic pressures in semi-arid regions of the world, have led to renewed scramble for control and ownership, access and use right to critical water resources. This has led often to a lot of contestation and sometimes conflict. In the case of Africa, the post-colonial state is saddled with pluralistic systems of governance where the statutory regulation coexists side by side with the traditional pre-colonial governance structures. These two systems of governance co-own and co-manage key resources, including land and water resources. Hence, the struggle for gaining and maintaining access to irrigation water, for instance, is spatially and temporally nested in differentiated power alignment and politically entangled in shifting alliances. Yet still, in the water security literature, water resources are often treated as a biophysical element that is devoid of historical, political, and emotional context. I seek to draw connections between the climate change, water insecurity, and contestation in semi-arid Ghana. To address these issues, I have two main questions. First one is, how can we use emancipatory ethnographic writing to address the challenge of climate-induced water insecurity? And what are the linkages between climate change, water resource contestation, and water access outcome on one side and legal pluralism on the other side? Legal pluralism, defined broadly, means the coexistence of multiple legal regimes or set of rules and regulations that govern access to various resources, including water. In this case, in the case of Ghana, You have the statutory system that is governed under a democratic constitutional state. And then you have the traditional system, which predates colonial system, the colonial era. To answer these questions, I adopt various methods, a combination of methods in what I call, or what has been called, geo-ethnography. That is combining ethnographic methods with geographic information sciences and geographic concept and frameworks of analysis. Under geo-ethnography, I use emancipatory ethnographic methods, including interviews, participant observation, resource accounting, and access analysis, as well as qualitative geographic information science, geographic information analysis, including NDVI, as well as spatial analysis. I also adopt a new and an emerging methods called the participatory drone mapping. That is the use of unmanned aerial vehicles as a new method of scientific inquiry. And in my case, I am using, I adopt a farmer-directed drone mapping approach. What I mean by that is farmers are those who help me draw the missions and also help me in accomplishing the mission flight. After that, I send the drone to take the pictures, the aerial pictures, and I print those images out and use that as a basis for photo elicitation interviews. And after all that, I conduct another drone mission where all the images of the irrigation area are taken. I align them and I do analysis, produce map, then exhibit the map for community feedback. So, and this is an ongoing research. I'm currently in Ghana at the moment on the field. And so far, the adopting an emancipatory ethnographic approach has enabled me to reveal how power, prestige, privilege, and authority serve to marginalize individuals who are from different classes in accessing irrigation water. So it has also enabled me to explain how the internal function of language, culture, construct spaces of exclusion and inequality to access. So in discussing with farmers, you see that each time a powerful person in society, for instance, an assemblyman or what we call the Tendamba, also known as the earth priest, is present, the language of the farmer significantly changes compared to when there is no powerful person around. It has also, using an emancipatory approach, has enabled me to also observe how everyday language and cultural symbols, including proverbs and customary rites and rituals, are used to construct and protect privilege and power in northeastern Ghana. So far, I believe that there is an immense potential for using emancipatory ethnographic writing to address climate change. And here are my reasons. First, an emancipatory approach empowers the farmer to actively participate in the research process and thereby leading to co-creation of knowledge. So the farmers are not just passive participants, they actively take part in the process of research. They are not just being researched, they are in some ways researchers in themselves as they discover their community from a different perspective. Using emancipatory approach coupled with the participatory drone mapping, it has enabled farmers to spatially visualize inequality in terms of irrigation water access. And this has empowered them to start thinking about issues of fairness, justice, and equity. So by using an emancipatory approach that empowers the farmer to actively participate in the research, it tends to engender discussions around issues of justice and distributional injustices. And consequently, they are able to engage with powerful people in society. For instance, I've had in focus group discussions I had at the very beginning of June with women-only focus group discussion, they have had cause to start asking questions about how women lands are relatively smaller in size compared to men. So in some way or the other, they are challenging patriarchal, I've equipped them to challenge patriarchal norms. The other aspect is that by using NDVI, I'm able to spatially show areas of water stress. And by showing areas of water stress and also showing how we can improve upon it, generating conversations around water resource sustainability and inclusive governance, as well as how we can creatively be resilient going forward. Through it all, the DU Ethnography Lab has shaped my work. The DU Ethnography Lab has provided immense resources, including advising and engagement and various opportunities for collaborative learning and feedback, where I am able to share my ideas and have a team of people responding to my write-up. The other aspect of DU Ethnography Lab is the conferences and colloquial opportunities it has provided me. For instance, in one of the colloquium, we were talked about how to apply for institutional review board approval and the processes involved. So that is the end of my presentation, and I welcome questions and contributions. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Camilla Kenyon. I'm going to share a PowerPoint about ethnography in the composition classroom and my collaborations with the Denver Ethnography Lab. So I have taught. Hello, I'm Camilla Kenyon. I'm going to share a PowerPoint about ethnography in the composition classroom and my collaborations with the Denver Ethnography Lab. So I have taught ethnography for over a decade in my research writing classes at the University of Denver. And in recent years, this teaching has been really enhanced by working with the DU Ethnography Lab. To start out with why ethnography in the writing class, I give my students Seth Kahn's article, Putting Ethnographic Writing in Context from 2011. And he talks about why ethnography in the writing class can be so productive. It teaches students to do different types of research and different types of writing, from incorporating field notes, interviews, various types of secondary research, sometimes personal narrative, and then shaping that diverse writing for different scholarly or popular audiences. By doing ethnography, Seth Kahn says, students learn to navigate relationships between participants and researchers, between writers and readers of ethnographic narratives. Now, some implications of ethnography for WAC and WID. Dubra Chattaraj wrote a recent article about anthropology and writing pedagogy. And this article, published in 2020, states that anthropology's broad-based understanding of evidence facilitates transfer across disciplines. Students become versed in embedding multiple forms of text in a single ethnographic discourse. Like I already mentioned, personal narrative, interviews, scholarly articles, journalistic writing, visual documents. So encountering that wide range of evidence and data early in college prepares students for divergent evidentiary practices of different disciplines, fields, and writing situations. I want to put things in the context of our writing program at DU. We have a goal-based writing program. So our various research writing courses share the goals of teaching differences between disciplines and groups of different disciplines, and differences between research traditions, text-based, interpretive, qualitative, or quantitative, as well as how to present that to audiences. And ethnography is really a good type of assignment for teaching all of those things. It's primarily qualitative, but also can have mixed methods where you have quantitative and text-based interpretive in addition. And the different disciplines, such as anthropology versus sociology, for example, really have different ways of presenting that research, where sociology tends to be very formal, introduction, methods, results, discussion. Some anthropology journals will give a lot more leeway for personal types of writing. So students come to realize that there's not one prefabricated formula for scholarly writing, but that can have a lot of different forms. In order to really emphasize writing across the disciplines or in the disciplines, the writing program started an event called Conversations in the Disciplines, which we've been having for over a decade, where different researchers represent how their fields embed quantitative, qualitative, or text-based interpretive research. And a couple of times I've invited Alejandro Cerron to talk about his qualitative research with epidemiology in Guatemala. After I started working more intensively in the Ethnography Lab, we decided to do a Conversations in the Disciplines event that was solely focused on ethnography. We had 3 researchers, Kelly Fayard in anthropology, Alison Krogel in languages, and Dinko Hanan Dinko in geography. And this was a recorded Zoom event because it took place in 2020 during the pandemic, but it turned out to be successful that way. We recorded it and made it available for other years. I just finished using it in my classes this spring as well. So what students learned from this? One thing was about positionality in ethnographic research. Kelly Fayard talked about researching her tribe from an insider's perspective because she feels that outsiders had gotten her culture wrong. And really students learned a lot about mixed methods research. Alison Krogel talked about her research on Quechua sheep herders and how she combines qualitative with text-based interpretive. And she talked about audience when she published this for the Journal of Latin American and Caribbean Anthropology. She had to leave out some things from that she did with the text-based close readings that would be more something that would be there in a humanities journal. So students came to realize, okay, not one type of academic research. Based on audience. And Dinko Hanan Dinko with mixed methods research talks about how he used quantitative in addition to qualitative interviews and focus group discussions. So some other ways that the Denver University Ethnography Lab has supported me with my writing classes, and also made this available to all of the faculty in the DU writing program. I made a series of videos with members of DUAL Some of these were instructional. We did one on positionality in research, on the difference between doing ethnography as an outsider, as a participant observer, or as an insider auto-ethnographer. That's something that my students have used a lot and that my colleagues in the writing program have also been able to draw on. In terms of experiential videos, we did one on ethnography in the pandemic, where I interviewed several members of Dual about how their research and teaching has changed under the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of them found affordances in being able to deal with online communities, whether in teaching or research, while other people found real sort of constraints on their research and not being able to have the physical field sites. But students in viewing this video got some good ideas for their own work and for how they could still do meaningful work during COVID. So also the Ethnography Lab has made, for the purpose of GRID 1133 and 1733 writing courses, sent a series of videos about individual researchers talking about their work and what it takes to complete an ethnographic project. So Alejandro Cerón spoke about animal health care practices in Guatemala. Zoe Johns talked about doing some work with a tattooing parlor, observing that from more of an outsider's perspective. There were videos on musical festivals and community, food and meaning. These are all the types of work that students could do in 1133 courses. And in addition, the Ethnography Lab has supported 1133, 1733 classes by offering one-on-one consultations. So my students really made use of this, making appointments with Dual at different stages of their composition process, whether to brainstorm topics, collect fieldwork observations, how to do interviews, how to present research to a variety. I expect that this is going to grow to be an even bigger part in future years, and especially as we get back to in-person teaching. In my own classes this spring quarter, I taught both 1733, the honors section, and 1133. Some of my students did participant observation research, such as studying yoga classes and how those took place online during COVID, and just joining those for the time of the research. But a lot of my students really gravitated towards auto-ethnography. That's something that's so natural to do under pandemic conditions, because you start with an intensive personal narrative and then you can extrapolate through intensive interviewing, which can be done like through Zoom, for example, and through extensive secondary research. So just to share a few topics, my students worked on hidden traumas, disparities amidst refugees, being a queer freshman, different things about cultural identity, like being Sudanese or American, things about conquering fear, body dysmorphic disorder, different forms of anxiety. So things that were relevant to students like living through the pandemic, but also a lot of things that show their involvement in various community issues, and that show an engagement with what's called like anthropology in action, or community engaged anthropology. And I want to mention that my students did reflective essays for their final writing program portfolios, which all of us in the writing program do as a way of helping facilitate student transfer through meta-analysis. In one really powerful autoethnography, a student talked about growing up in a ghetto, gang dominated, and in her reflective portfolio essay, I want to just read a quote from that to show how she really was thinking about positionality and about sharing her own experiences with an outsider audience. She writes, in my work seeking to break down the stereotypical definition of a ghetto, I have the insight of an insider. I grew up in this community. I lived, I felt, and I saw the tragedies of gang violence. When I read articles in the media that make it seem that we are not capable of succeeding or being a part of society, it rubs me the wrong way because I know my community is capable. We are just underfunded and unsupported. By having this insider perspective, I learned how to use this lens and mold it to create a piece that would define and engage an outsider's perspective, someone who does not share my experience. In other projects, I got a lot of autoethnographies about living with imposter syndrome, and a lot of work really with community engaged anthropology in action. Future directions in working with the Ethnography Lab as we go in person, looking forward to in-person consultations and events, opportunities for support as students move into physical field sites, and a new emphasis on field notes. I'd like to end by drawing attention to Basserman's Domination, Participation, and Agency from the Reference Guide to Writing Across the Curriculum. So Basserman emphasizes that WAC as both theory and practice has espoused the ideals of student empowerment through language, as students learn about disciplinary discourses that were once mysterious to them. But at the same time, there is this danger that disciplinary discourses may be viewed as assimilationist. So it's really important in ethnography as a way that the personal and the scholarly can be brought into conversation, that ethnography, in its nature is not assimilationist. Students can use their personal experience, the language that they use in their home communities together with the language their interviewees use with a more traditionally scholarly language in their secondary sources, and it all coheres together. So I also believe that this is the type of thinking and writing that has a really good potential for transfer. So I'm going to end there, and thank you for listening.
Oh, I think you are muted right now.
We will be happy to talk. It looks like we have over 15 minutes to take some questions. I would like to ask Alejandro to maybe elaborate further. I enjoyed the last set of keynotes, and there was really a discussion of how WAC and WID is changing. It has changed during the past kind of year and a half with both the pandemic and also this kind of struggle for racial justice, and just kind of wondering, Alejandro, what you see as kind of the future, some of the future directions for the Ethnography Lab, and how you feel like this past year and a half has kind of impacted Dual.
Thank you, Camila. Let's see. Well, the main thing I think is that we have perhaps confirmed that one can plan life, but then life has ways for showing you that those plans were just I don't know, ideas and not set in stone. But I think that we have perhaps something that has happened is that we have learned to appreciate the possibilities of digital and digital worlds. in a way that we did not used to do. I think that a lot of ethnographers, including myself, would see ethnography in the digital world as something else, not necessarily less of an ethnography, but something else that I was not going to do because I'm not a digital ethnographer. But I found myself doing my research through digital ethnography tools these past couple of years. So incorporating that, and of course, I have been having a lot of conversations with students about that. The other aspect that I think is clearer for me and for the conversations I have been having with students is that I think that we have also found easier or perhaps more urgent to find ways for effectively collaborating with communities and people who sometimes may be thought of as hard to reach. So exploring the collaboration in a deeper sort of level, I think, is something really cool that we will be focusing more on. I think, and then of course it's funny now to think about how we would always think about in-person lectures or workshops or whatever. And it was because of COVID that we ended up, for instance, recording those videos of for experiential and instructional ethnography, and so I feel like we now have those tools that we maybe were not using as much in the past, and we can see them now as something that we can use not only for pandemic reasons, but also because they, in a way, increase access to knowledge and to information. I will leave it there because I can just go on and on. And
all right, well, I kind of have a question for the audience. Do any of you work with ethnography either as teachers or as kind of a tool in your own research?
Excuse me for just speaking up here for a minute. This is Cameron. I see that Thomas has his hand up. Maybe you'd like to just go for him.
Oh, yes. I didn't see that. Yes. So Thomas, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. I'll respond to your question really quickly and then ask mine. I don't so much, but I'm curious to think about it in terms of how it might be usefully applied in WAC, writing instruction in particular. I know others do. So that was one of the reasons I was interested to come in and listen and think about the potential of it as a pedagogy, applied through a WAC lens, particularly, right, as we really think about how communities shape language and how language is shaped across contexts of use. I think my question is, this might sound really tangential, but it's kind of an interest, a research interest of mine. Is you mentioned, Alejandro, in one of your early slides that there are a series of undergraduate researchers who participate in various aspects of the laboratory, but we didn't really hear much about them. And so I'm kind of curious to talk a little bit about them and what their roles are, how you identify them, what they really do, and kind of what they get out of the work that they do in the lab. And sort of a particular interesting part of that for me is really thinking about how the center itself provides these other opportunities that are outside of those classroom contexts and are more experiential in orientation, as you were mentioning.
Thank you. Let's see. So for me, this all started with just trying to bring experiential learning to classes I teach, and the way how I did that was pretty much I would start the class by telling students, so I don't see you as a student, I see you as my colleague, and we will be working together on this project for this organization. And of course, my job is, because I am, older and have more experience doing this kind of thing, my job is
to help lead the team in a productive way. That kind of conversation. And then we would engage probably on the second day of class with some community partner who would tell us what their need was. And then we would do a lot of workshopping in the classroom. So the classes became these sort of workshops where we would maybe divide tasks, come up with ways for addressing what the community partner was asking us to do, and then turn that into something we could do within a quarter, right? So a lot of my job was kind of like to help the team navigate the roller coaster of anxiety that we would go through, because sometimes you feel like, oh my gosh, this is due in 3 weeks and we don't have enough, right? But we will spend a lot of time working, even writing together in the classroom. Now, as this became bigger, we, and to be honest, we are kind of like navigating this whole thing, right? But some students that I can tell you about, of course, are the students who have engaged at a deeper level. They have, for instance, come up with an interest in getting involved in a particular project. And then from there, we have had conversations about how could they best participate in the project, and maybe they have written grant proposals, or a lot of what I like to do is to do the collaboration aspect of this. So we have been collaborating with Project Protect Food System Workers, for instance, and with them, they, for instance, they needed a lit review, for instance. A lit review about certain topics was something that they really wanted. So a couple of students ended up doing that. Lots of feedback from the community partner, and then me helping them translate that feedback into something that was not too overwhelming. Some students really wanted to do interviews and that kind of thing, and the community partner needed their story to be told. So we came up with a little project that we turned into an opportunity for these students to do those interviews, which ended up turning into their final papers for something that they needed to do as requirements for graduation. But just before this meeting, I was with a student and a community partner, and we are starting to put together a virtual exhibit. And this student, who is actually a first-year grad student, that student is working on a lot of the writing that goes into what will be eventually the exhibit. So lots of like, how long should it be? How much research does it go into this? Anyway, so just to name a few, and again, to not monopolize, which I can do, as you can see.
So yeah, Terry has a question. Could you please go ahead?
Yes, more. Well, you had asked who has taught ethnography, and so I was going to add that yes, I put in the chat that I taught advanced writing ethnography course for a number of years before I retired. I think one of the hardest things about teaching that course is to teach students to be systematic researchers, because they think that if they're investigating people's lives and lived concerns, that it's I don't know, doesn't require a certain systematic approach, and that's something that I insisted on. I guess there's not a question there. I'm just really responding to your question.
Yeah, Cameron. I think you're muted. Yeah.
Thank you, Jerry. That's really interesting about how it is that you combine the personal and the professional there. My question really is for Dinko, Hanan Dinko. I'm very interested myself in the idea of the function of language and culture as it constructs spaces of exclusion that you talked about. This seems very, very important. And you called it, it seems to me, a very interesting name, the emancipatory ethnographic writing. And so you sort of talked about how it might sort of be applicable or come into play. But I wondered if you could just talk more about what it is that you meant by emancipatory ethnographic writing. In other words, how do you know it when you see it, if you will? What are its characteristics? What are you sort of looking for, if you will?
Thank you. So emancipatory ethnography, as I'm applying it in my research, is to not just go into the community to write how the community is organized or how their social relations take place, but also introduce new ideas and let them act on those ideas. For instance, using the drone mapping, for instance, farmers are able for the first time see their land in relation to various water resources that are available. And just before the meeting started, Alejandro and I were discussing an emerging issue that I have encountered, where women farmers tend to have farms far away from the dam or the water sources. And just by having a drone image that shows how far their land is to the water, they are able to realize this inequality, and based on that, I hope to trigger some sort of renegotiation or like draw attention to how land is, how there is spatial inequality, and how that spatial inequality takes a gendered form. And this past week, I presented the results of the drone images to a chief in the community. Chiefs are very important in access to land. So I presented the results of how this culture of giving women land far away in from the water resource is disadvantaging them. Mm-hmm. So by that confrontation, I am in some ways or the other drawing the attention of the chief to certain unequal practices that is happening in society. And by that, you are emancipating people who have been at the receiving end of unequal resource allocation practices.
Yeah, that's what yeah. Sorry, and that sounds very interesting. What I hear from you is that you're using a visual language, the language of visuality, and then translating it into an oral narrative. So the writing is actually visual and oral, as I understand. Is that correct? Yeah. Good. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, wonderful. Some other questions? I've been looking.
I'm sorry. I did have my hand raised, but I lowered it because it was almost time. Okay. But I did type a lot in the chat because I've been using ethnographic writing in projects for a long time now. And I just wanted to comment that at one point, I feel like, so for the most part, I do teach first year writing because I'm a lecturer. And I think that at one point, I like 1 year, I think I just didn't use the ethnographic assignment only because I feel like sometimes it was hard for me to quote unquote sell it to the freshmen that I was teaching, because I mean, so they're not thinking like researchers yet, and we can like, you know, have them do that. But I did say stuff like that, like, you know, I would say that this is you're going out in the field and you're like, you know, you're gathering things, you're doing research and all of that. And sometimes I think it was hard for them to make the connection. I mean, I would say it was half and half. Some students did make connections and some students didn't, but I think that it was a good thing for them to go outside and like kind of do writing about stuff they see. But I think sometimes it is a little hard for me to, like I said, quote unquote, sell it. So I did type in the chat that there were WAC workshops that we had, or one of the workshops was at my university at San Jose State, was focused on ethnographic writing, ethnographies in general, and professors from other fields were doing it too. So the idea was to use ethnographies to make the course material a little more interactive and interesting. And I think it actually went really well, and it was sponsored by our department. And we sort of created a repository of basically prompts for either short or long assignments. And I think it does help in making some of the courses outside of writing, right, like physics, or we had people from bio, we had people from the sciences and social sciences. But I mean, social science, of course, you do go out a lot, but I think it actually was, I don't know, I would say better in a lot of ways to do ethnographic projects or writing outside of writing, right? A writing class.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing some of your experiences.